Welcome, everyone, and you are listening to The Last Dinosaur, and I'm your host, Chris Aversano. Today's guest is Maria Conatser, newly elected president, International Propeller Club of the United States, and she does this role in addition to her full-time job as a senior financial planning analyst with the Ingram Barge company. Today, we're going to be talking to Maria in her capacity as president of the International Propeller Club of the U.S. The Propeller Club was conceived in 1922 as an ever-growing group of maritime professionals met informally each day over lunch to discuss the issues of the industry. As the group became too large for casual conversations, speakers began to be invited to address the group. Growth continued, and in January of 1923, the Propeller Club of the Port of New York was formed, with 33 in attendance, choosing the name and scheduling regular meetings. Fast forward to today, the International Propeller Club of the United States is an international business network dedicated to the promotion of the maritime industry, commerce, and global trade. There are more than 80 ports in maritime locations around the world, including almost 30 in foreign cities. So what is an organization like the Propeller Club? How do they stay up to date in today's digital age? That's what we're going to talk about with Maria. Maria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
When you think of these organizations that we spoke a little bit about earlier, Propeller Club, maybe Nautical Institute, which I did something for, CMA, and all these other ones. Older club, kind of, you think this is just a bunch of older folks sitting around. But tell us about what you're doing today and a little bit about your background and kind of the future looks like.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. So as you mentioned, we began informally just over 100 years ago as a group of maritime professionals discussing the issues of the industry. And today we're still a group of maritime professionals discussing the issues of the industry. And that brings us directly to the push for the revitalization. With so many critical issues facing the industry, it's really imperative that we grow and strengthen the organization so that we can educate legislators and the public as to the importance of waterborne commerce and to advocate for the industry worldwide. We are uniquely positioned in that we are the most diverse maritime networking organization, with members from all levels of organizations and from organizations that are both directly and indirectly associated with maritime. So that encompasses a very wide reach. And this gives us a unique opportunity to discuss issues and learn from one another and to work and help solve the industry challenges. The stronger and wider the reach, the more likely that we are to be able to affect change.
A little bit about, you just had I believe that was the international meeting a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, down in Tampa. Talk a little bit about the tone and the tenor and how that felt, especially given like what you're saying, you have to increase the reach and really it's become more than just a bunch of folks hanging out and eating lunch in New York, which, I'm down for that, of course. But I think, like you said, they go beyond probably doing things like, which ships are coming into port next week and so on and so forth. It's a wide-ranging question.
Yeah. So we had a great international conference. Amazingly enough, Tampa did a fantastic job. You would have never known that they had just experienced back-to-back hurricanes. So, we were concerned that we might not be able to have the convention, but there were some really great sessions. I mean, there were sessions we talked about cyber attacks, not if, but when, both on a personal level and a business level. I mean, we've all been impacted by data breach. And so they really talked about the 3 steps to cybersecurity, which is prevent, respond, and recover. And a lot goes into preventing. I mean, there's so many things that we can do to prevent, enhancing your security features, updating your software, creating a culture of cybersecurity awareness if you're a business, and then respond, act quickly and efficiently to mitigate the issues and then recover. Restore or replace all your data. And so that was really, really, really interesting. But what also surprised me was that related to cyber attacks, there's also cyber issue known as deepfakes. And so I recently came across an article and I was really surprised. 92% of organizations have been financially impacted by deepfakes. So it's either audio, video, or, altered documents. But some of these impacts that these companies have had have been up to $8 figures. I mean, it's really far reaching, very expensive. So there's definitely a lot on the horizon there. There were sessions on AI in the maritime industry. So how are we using artificial intelligence? And so we're using it for navigation and route optimization. We're using it to reduce and to learn about our fuel consumption and how can we reduce our use. We're learning about equipment and vessel maintenance, analyzing the performance of your equipment and allowing issues to be identified early so you're able to save money and result in better operations. And then also with training, I mean, we're using virtual reality and augmented reality for training. And so potentially to save a tremendous amount of money and perhaps even lives. So now we have the opportunity and the ability to put a person in an immersive and interactive experience where they can hone their skills without the real world risks or costs. So it aligns with the growing emphasis that we have on safety and operational efficiency. And training can be standardized to comply with specific regulations and requirements. So lots of real exciting things there. Then there were also panels and discussions on achieving net zero emissions through a combination of technologies. We also talked about fighting the gray wave, portside care, the importance of and the availability of healthcare for mariners, piracy on the high seas, which is interesting. Also, drones and the future of port security. So lots of great topics that were discussed. So it was a fabulous event. Absolutely had a great time. Great speakers, great interactions. It was a fantastic event.
So that sounds really good because, again, I think it goes back, especially with the younger folk. They look at organizations and they always think about the following, what's in it for me, right? So how can it help me? And I think one of the things that I think COVID has taught us, and networking, especially in our industry, is really one of the key critical things. And I ran up against this when I was a shipbroker. You had some guys who were fabulous and they didn't want to really network. They want to talk to 2 or 3 people, but not everybody has that luxury. Like if you're a good shipbroker, but not a great one, you always have to worry about that other thing. Or in my case, maybe I was, an average plus shipbroker, but I realized that there's this huge industry out there and they're doing all these things. And at one point, it will all be interconnected. So talk about one of the challenges. And I think that this is not unique to what you do, to Propeller Club, but other places, is how do you engage the younger members of the maritime industry and adjacent industries and get them to participate on a regular basis, or at least just forget about becoming members, but participate in these conferences, whether it's big ones or local port meetups?
Well, you hit on it exactly. So first and foremost, we learned a lot from the pandemic. Number one, we learned the importance of diversification, both with regards to the revenue stream and with regards to the offerings to our members. We began providing virtual content in the form of webinars and panel discussions. And what a great opportunity that was to provide content to a larger group of individuals with speakers from anywhere in the world. We began holding regular virtual meetings with each region and among regions. And we saw stronger connections develop. And we saw communications improve. We were no longer encumbered by distance. So the pandemic led to a greater adoption of digital technologies. Not only did the surge in digitalization save a lot of companies during the pandemic, but it enabled associations like ours to keep connected with its members. Now that we've come out of the pandemic, we recognize that it's still very important to provide diverse offerings that provide member value. We can expand and grow our membership by providing a variety of targeted offerings. Not all folks in an organization want or need the same things from an organization. So we can offer events that are purely social in nature. We can host business meetings and networking opportunities. We can hold annual conferences. We can provide educational opportunities, and we can host philanthropic events to make a difference in our communities. All of those things can reach different people and provide value to different individuals. And then I think another thing is being intentional about what we want for the organization. And so a big intentional push for us was to intentionally focus on growing and strengthening the organization. And so year over year, we've seen about an 11% increase in membership. We have 6,000 plus members now, with 41 active domestic ports and 24 active international ports. In the past year, we've chartered 3 new international ports, one in Varna, Bulgaria, one in Limassol, Cyprus, and another in Oslo, Norway. And we have more in the pipeline coming down. And then we've also chartered a new port domestically in Palm Beach. And we've recently rechartered our port in Chicago after being dormant for 16 years. Chris Carr, president of the club, and Ben Pennington, vice president of the club, have done a fabulous job kicking that off. They've hosted numerous successful events. They already have over 100 new members, and it's just been wildly successful. Now, prior to closing in 2008, the Chicago chapter had been active and thriving for 70 plus years. I mean, it was a key player in the maritime industry. So we're excited to have them back on board. And we really do believe that with the greater awareness and the networking, it's really going to help lead to more investment, both on the U.S. side and the global maritime community.
I was president of the CMA during COVID, so I had to deal with a lot of the type of issues, that you talked about. Membership, it was shocking to me that people refused to pay dues of $100, which, it was not really a lot. Because the CMA wasn't hosting in-person events. And that was really very shocking to me. It also was a little bit of a wake-up call. And one thing that I guess I look back, and if COVID didn't happen, that I would have loved to pursue, and I'm curious to hear about your thoughts, is working with other very similar nonprofits. So my thought was working with like a WISTA to do co-branded events, or working with Young Ship New York or Young Ship Texas. I see Young Ship Oslo has I think they have a pretty decent active chapter. So working with those, and you say, well, wait a minute, you're competing. They're slightly different. Maybe there's probably overlap in members, and a lot of folks will put their membership against their company. A company will sponsor them. And I think most of these memberships are not extremely expensive in terms of industry membership dues. Talk to me a little bit about like your approach. Is that something that you're thinking about to kind of build this kind of community?
Yes, absolutely. So that's definitely one of our strategic visions. One aspect is to strengthen our position as an industry advocate, leader, and government liaison. So we want to be recognized as a source of information for the industry and the U.S. government as well. So we want to continue to recognize government officials that are champions for our industry. We want to facilitate meetings between members, ports, and lawmakers. We want to be a source of industry-wide news. We want to shine a light and facilitate content and thought around issues that challenge our industry. But we must partner with other like-minded organizations to facilitate those thoughts and discussions so that we can bring greater awareness to the industry. And we need to develop that not only on the domestic level, but on the international level as well. That's one of the reasons why we have made an intentional decision to include and develop a strong international leadership component among our executive committee. There's so many important issues facing the industry, and that gives us a better opportunity to work with others.
Thing that I do see that and that I am impressed with, especially the Chicago chapter and then the Limassol chapter, is the use of social media. Talk to me a little bit about being intentional and seeing how you could use that to really foster a sense of community, and B, build out what you're trying to do.
The Port of Piraeus is fabulous about using social media and with their presence. And so we are working to improve on that as well at the international level. A strong digital and social media presence is very important. And we're working to move out of that dinosaur age here, as you like to put it. I think people expect you to be on social media. They expect you to have a digital presence. So it helps you to attract members. It helps remind people and educate them about your organization and the benefits of membership. So we're working on developing a stronger presence on and a better use of social media. So we do have a communications team working specifically on that area because that's not one of our strengths that we have in here. And we're also working currently to revamp our website, so that we can increase our discoverability, we can expand our reach, we can better engage our members and encourage them to participate and to be active, as well as providing them valued resources such as news, blogs, forums where they can interact, educational content, member directories, event calendars, and registration as well. So those are all very important items. And we are moving out of the dinosaur age. We just haven't.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the hardest things. If you look at a lot of organizations, you look at their website and you're like, what are we doing here, folks? And it just seems to be so antiquated. And I do think that, especially now where you have people who are recently get out of college, they expect this whole other experience in terms of being able to register almost with like a click of a button. Maybe one or two things and then a credit card or pay Apple Pay or Bitcoin or kind of whatever. I'm joking tongue in cheek, but that's what they really expect. The other interesting thing that you talked about, and I think this is where it gets really exciting for organizations like yours that are international, and that is going after a whole untapped market in terms of places like South America, Africa, probably parts of Europe, and like you have in, I think it was Bulgaria that you just mentioned, as well as parts of Asia. Talk a little bit about that goal, because I really think if you look at the next generation of leadership and interest is going to be in that part of the world.
Several years ago, we made the intentional decision that we were going to be more internationally focused. So our industry is the backbone of the world economy. And so we share in the responsibility to ensure the strength and success of both the domestic and the international market. We need to support the merchant marine and the related industries globally. We need to address national and international security and economic needs. We need to collaborate with organizations. We need to encourage international trade. But in order to be able to do this, we have to cultivate relationships, and then we can work to achieve the initiative. We can't strengthen and advance the international maritime industry if we only focus on what's going on in our own borders. And so that's why, for the first time in the organization's history, we have a strong international component on our executive leadership team. Our first vice president is Kostis Frangoulis. He is the president of the International Propeller Club Port of Piraeus. He's also the founder, president, and CEO of Franman, which is a Greek company that provides a wide range of equipment, parts, products, and services to shipping worldwide. And then our second vice president is Dorothea Ioannou, who's CEO of the American P&I Club. So Dorothea is a member of both the New York and New Jersey chapters, as well as the Piraeus chapter, and she splits her time between New York and Greece. So having this strong international component allows us to focus on establishing and cultivating those relationships abroad so we can start working on those initiatives of shared purpose.
One of the items that we've discussed here is, of course, something called sea blindness. And that's the whole idea of people don't understand about how everything is connected via ships and via trade. And not to get into, U.S. Politics, but yeah, it gets into tariffs and understanding how, well, no, this comes on a ship and this is how it works. And the cargo is discharged and then it's moved on a truck or moved on a pipeline or put into a barge and moved up the river on an Ingram barge. And, and then eventually goes to a warehouse someplace and then along the Mississippi River is repackaged and is sold to a farmer who sells it to you. And yet, people don't understand that this is every day, 90% of everything. And I think that that's, having the international component and making that more relevant and making that louder and then combine that with the social media, strategy, I think is really the winning combination. And like I said, what I think is unique is that because you're in the International Propeller Club, you have that in your mandate to build that out, which I think is, super important to do. Talk a little bit about like some of the experienced people who've been around for a while. Do you find a lot of resistance to that change? Because what I find, especially in the software side of the business, and tongue in cheek, the name of this podcast is The Last Dinosaur, is that there are people who don't want to change. You're like, oh, I like doing my lunches and I don't really care about cybersecurity because I run a small stevedoring firm and I don't have to worry about that. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I've always find that that's part of the interesting thing is some of the challenges. We think a lot of people are forward thinking, this is what we're going to do, but there's a lot of people who resist that. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I very much believe that. And I think that's why we are still in that dinosaur age and start trying to come out of that now. And that's why it's so important as we want to attract more people to the industry, in particular younger folks to the industry. We have to have targeted offerings that target whatever they're desiring to get out of the organization. And so, we still need to have those happy hours where people just can talk and whatever, but we also need to have that interaction and the capability to provide digital offerings that the younger people want. And so, yes, we are slowly moving toward that. There's lots of opportunity. We have a tremendous opportunity to use this tool and to engage others and to build this underdeveloped pipeline that we have in the industry.
I moderated a conference, one particular panel at the recent Nautical Institute, their biannual North America gathering. I think it was about a week or two before yours. And it was very interesting because there was a lot of people who've been members for a long time who've been coming to this, and they changed the theme. I think something very similar to yours, so like emerging technologies. And I spoke to a Houston pilot and somebody who does a PR response in the maritime space. And you could tell, like, even some of the people who've been around were like, wow, this is really interesting. So it is a slow process. Obviously, the younger generations, they got it. They thought it was fantastic. But there was definitely it wasn't met with skepticism, but it was certainly met with like, okay, I want to hear about simulators. I want to hear about this, which is kind of more their mandate. And we kind of spun out something else, only for an hour and a half of the show of the conference. There was more stuff, but I think you're right. I think you do need to kind of feed the older kind of, not older, but the more well-established folks, and then you got to give the new folks something, because that's going to be the future and kind of shaping any sort of organization.
Interesting. If there's one thing I've learned over the 29 years that I've worked in the industry, is the need for patience. The wheels of change move very slow.
And they really do, especially like in your part of the world, the inland tug and barge, adopting to technologies or change. It's just, it takes a while. And it takes obviously all the things that you read about in any sort of change management, buy-in from senior management, buy-in from, key people, make it simple. Don't force it down people's throat. It's all the things that you learn about. Speaking of which, I like to wrap as we get close to wrapping up. Speaking of which, one of the things I love to ask people is, you've been in the business. We talked a little bit before. You kind of like fell into it backwards, but 30 years ago. So you've been in the business as long as me and other folks. Rewinding to yourself 30 years ago, or seeing another young woman or a young person, maybe they come in, they intern with you, or maybe they're a student that comes to one of your association meetings. What would you say to them about saying this is a really good career path in industry?
Great that you bring that up. So I think it's really important, first of all, that we increase the public awareness as to the importance and the magnitude of industry, right? We have to eliminate the invisibility of the industry or the sea blindness, because I think this has really hindered our ability to attract support as well as investment in workers to the industry. This is an area that we really need to delve in a little bit more. There's so many exciting things going on there. And so one of the big opportunities I see for the organization is with regard specifically to workforce development. We've seen a decline in the number of workers in the industry, impacted by retirements, career changes, and all kinds of other challenges. But it's critical that we not only attract, but retain these folks in the industry. And so with supply chain management and logistics education growing, we really have an opportunity to attract more talent. But we have to deliver on improving the perception of and the value of our industry to folks. And so we need to understand what it is that motivates these young workers. And according to several studies, the cost of living and climate change are top concerns. And then regarding employment, work-life balance and learning development are top criteria. But the societal and environmental impact of organizations are also key. Many say that they would turn down a job if the values fail to align with what they want. So we really need to highlight on how Maritime can deliver on what they want. And then on the seafarer side, we need to improve the quality of life on board vessels. So connectivity to the internet, the ability to call home is extremely important. Wages need to be attractive to induce people to work away from home. There needs to be adequate shore leave.
Yep.
We need to provide opportunities to transition from maritime to shore. And then in the instances where workers are mistreated, we need to address and remediate those situations immediately. So we've got to reach out to schools, to parents, and to students. We need to provide opportunities for them to learn about the industry, to engage with folks in the industry, and then have opportunities with the industry. There's so many technological advancements that we have a lot of opportunity to attract tech savvy and tech interested people. So we really need to focus on that. And so while the pandemic highlighted the importance of shipping and the reliance on and the resilience of our industry, the reality is that people have a really short memory. And as they say, out of sight, out of mind. So unless you have a personal connection to shipping, many people don't appreciate the impact and the magnitude of our industry. So there's where we really have the opportunity to make a difference.
Organizations, I know like the Connecticut Maritime Association, they have a scholarship for anybody who's interested in the maritime space. And it doesn't have to be at one of the schools. It could be, you study logistics at, I think, is it the University of Tennessee or one of the schools in the SEC conference? Sorry, for people not listening in the U.S., that's the big sports conference, and those are generally the southern schools. One of them have a very robust logistics. So even somebody studying there, basically, it says something like, hey, I'm going to focus on the maritime space. We have scholarship money for them as well as the more traditional route. Someone like myself going to one of the boat schools and going on ships, as I affectionately call it. But I do think there is a great opportunity for all these organizations, yours, Nautical Institute, all these ones, and I'm sure there are dozens of others that could reach out and say, hey, this is a really great industry to be a part of. You don't have to sail. You could be in the logistics side. You could be a financial controller. You could be a developer. And the one thing that is interesting, as you touch upon the study that you referred to about like having a good impact, is if you look at how trade works, 90% of everything, maritime shipping is the most cost-effective from an energy spend footprint. Yes, they're big footprints, but if you then say, well, how much did this mug actually, what was the footprint ship versus rail versus airplane versus truck? It's not even close. That ships are the most effective, and barges are the most effective way to move things from an environmental impact. And if you look at what the mandates, whether it's direct mandates like from the IMO or more indirect mandates that companies or groups of companies are looking to do to improve those emissions, maybe on their own ahead of legislation, almost regardless of what's going on in the U.S., just from a consumer, like what you refer to, as well as other areas, I think it's a great place that you can make an impact. Because there aren't a ton of people doing it, like you could honestly make a material impact on one of probably the biggest challenges that's going on in our industry, and that's fuel efficiency and the move towards zero or close to zero. So I think it's interesting. Like you could have somebody, oh, I would never work for shipping. Well, why not? Well, you guys are dirty. But think about it for a second. You go, wait a minute. And you had all these exciting technologies from you're reading about ammonia powered tugs I read about the other day. I mean, I'm sure folks in your company are looking at that, to wind assist. I think Maersk Tankers just signed something this morning, recently here, that all of a sudden they're gonna a bunch of their new buildings with wind assist. I mean, that's a material impact.
Absolutely. And when you look at the maritime industry, I mean, it's a major employer. We support more than 60 million jobs globally.
Yeah.
Is a lot. And the industry is on a growth trajectory. So it's only expected to continue growing. So that's the type of industry that you want to be a part of.
Exactly. We got some work to do in certain aspects in terms of inclusion and diversity and all that stuff. But I think everybody has their eyes wide open with that as well. As I wrap up, the final question I'd love to ask is, you were just traveling to Tampa. Not sure how much you travel in your day job, but I'm sure as the president of the Propeller Club and having maybe to go visit, what are you reading? Anything interesting or nothing really? Or you listen to podcasts or listen to audiobooks or what have you?
So right now I'm reading a book called Beyond the Red Zone by BJ Daniels. BJ Daniels was a star quarterback at the University of South Florida, and he went on to play professionally in the NFL. He was part of the winning Super Bowl team with the Seattle Seahawks in 2013. But now he's the assistant director of donor community and alumni engagement at the University of South Florida. And he's made it his mission to use his lived experience in football, both the positive and the difficult realities, to inspire international change in the way we talk about and deal with mental health. So that's what I'm reading right now. Really excited about that. And then next on my list to read is 0 .4, How U.S. Leadership in Maritime Will Secure America's Future by retired Rear Admiral James Watson and Carlene Walker.
We all know, yeah, Carlene, guest number 3 on the guest number.
About the decline in the U.S. flag fleet in the shipbuilding industry. So we've had decades of neglect, and this underinvestment has really left our industry far behind. So we see the impact that it's had in the Navy on shipbuilding, ports and waterways, the Coast Guard.
Oh, yeah.
And I believe one reason for this is our nation's sea blindness.
Oh, yeah.
We have to develop and thoughtfully pursue and execute a U.S. maritime strategy.
And and it's going to take a lot of, you could have multiple podcasts, probably do a lot of yelling and screaming, which my podcast is not about Jones Act and all this stuff. And it just gets into this massive, massive headache. I have a solution, but I'm not going to get into it here. But it's
the key takeaway is we will not have a solution unless we make a concerted effort to establish a strategy and execute it.
Yeah, no, it won't. And I think there are some flickers of hope, but I do think that I've heard about that book. I know Carlene. I don't know the Admiral involved, but I see it on social media, actually. But all right, that sounds like a good one. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that once they get done. But Maria, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, talking about the Propeller Club, but also talking about kind of how organizations like yours, tried and true organizations that, didn't pop up in the last 5 years, but really have been established, how they look to kind of reestablish and build out themselves. And it was a wonderful journey through that. And I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to be here.